Reported by Chet Huntley and David Brinkley.
Commercial banks, for the fourth time in 4 months, raised their prime interest rates today from 7 up to 7.5%. This means that interest rates on farms, houses, consumer goods, livestock, and other investments will soar as high as 10% or more for many Americans. And it may also mean that the next big decision for the Nixon administration will have to be in the area of the national economy. Congressman Wright Patman, chairman of the Banking Committee, urged the president to roll back the new interest rate before the country is plunged into depression. On a somewhat different tack, Senator Proxmire of Wisconsin asserted today that the income tax surcharge has been a total failure as a device against inflation. He called for big cuts in federal spending. The Federal Reserve Board reported that industrial output in February continued to expand. The stock market today took all this stoically and moderate trading. The Dow Jones Industrials were down 1/4 point, and the value of an average share of common stock went up 11 cents. David?
The fighting goes on around Saigon, and the cost is high. There are no casualty figures yet. The American B-52s again were called in to attack what were known or thought to be concentrations of enemy troops on 4 sides of Saigon. The precise results were not known. While the war goes on and the cost in lives and money continues to rise, critics of the war are beginning to be heard again, charging President Nixon as not trying hard enough or fast enough to end it. Senator McGovern of South Dakota made a speech on this in the Senate today, and here's a part of what he said.
We have invoked the old slogan claiming the need to negotiate from strength, and then launched what has been called an accelerated pacification campaign designed to keep constant military pressure on the enemy. Well, the North Vietnamese responded to our bombing halt by withdrawing 22 full regiments from South Vietnam. We were preparing a great extension of our own offensive operations in the South. Now, let us be honest about the present military activities in the South. Are the current attacks by the Viet Cong a calculated offense ordered by Hanoi? Or is this Viet Cong drive a response to our own offense over the last 4 or 5 months? I think most of the critics of our policy in Vietnam were willing to give the president a reasonable length of time to carry out what he indicated during the campaign was a new plan for ending the war. But more than 4 months have passed since the election. 2 months have passed since the president took over the White House, and I think the time has come for the administration to halt the military escalation of the war and to unveil the plan that the president talked about in the campaign for bringing about an end to the killing.
But the 2 Democratic leaders of the Senate, Senators Mansfield and Kennedy, defended the president on this point. They both said he ought to be given more time and latitude and given a chance to work out a reasonable settlement in Paris. And they both thought he had not had enough time yet.
The Huntley-Brinkley Report is produced by NBC News and brought to you in color by Anheuser-Busch Incorporated, St. Louis, Missouri. Brewers of world-renowned Budweiser, King of Beer.
I'm giving a little demonstration. I'm putting together a sandwich for all you breadwinners out there. Where do you see this? Now, that's a real man sandwich. The great American hero for the great American hero.
Israeli jet aircraft today struck 8 guerrilla encampments in Jordan, south of the Sea of Galilee. And in East Jerusalem, engineers demolished the homes of 4 Arab families where terrorists had assertedly been housed. These attacks followed assaults on 3 guerrilla bases yesterday, one of them on the outskirts of Amman, the capital of Jordan. Mrs. Golda Meir was sworn in today as Prime Minister of Israel. She emphatically rejected any plan of an imposed peace for the Mideast, and she added that there will be no revision of Israel's borders until the Arab countries agree to firm and lasting peace in the area. King Hussein of Jordan, reportedly scheduled to talk with President Nixon soon, is in Cairo. Today he talked with United States Representative Robert Anderson after a meeting with Egyptian President Nasser last night. David?
The Space Agency has released some color film of the most complicated maneuver ever made in space. During the Apollo 9 flight, the moon landing ship separated from the command ship and operated on its own for more than 6 hours before they were rejoined. The separation took place on the 5th day of the 10-day flight. The moment of separation is shown in this film taken by astronaut David Scott in the command spacecraft. Astronauts McDivitt and Schweikert were in the moon landing craft. After separation, Scott fired the command ship's thrusters to draw away from the moon landing ship. Later, McDivitt fired the descent engine and pulled away from the command ship. This is a picture of the command ship taken from the moon landing ship. By firing the lunar landing ship's descent engine at various stages, McDivitt and Schweikert eventually reached a point 113 miles away from the command ship. In this film, the 4 legs on the lunar ship are in the position they would be in for an actual landing on the moon. Eventually, the moon landing ship returned to the command ship and completed a successful docking. The purpose of it was to show that astronauts could rejoin the command ship after landing on the moon in the lunar ship. Another piece of film the Space Agency released shows the re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere of the command ship. The Apollo 9 mission lasted 10 days, and the command craft made a perfect landing off Grand Turk Island in the Atlantic Ocean. The fireball visible in this film is caused by friction of the Earth's atmosphere on the heat shield. And this film, taken by the astronauts inside, shows them nearing splashdown. The main parachutes have opened. McDivitt, Scott, and Schweikert are just moments away from the successful finish of their flight. The success of Apollo 9 was so great that there was some speculation Apollo 10 might try to land men on the moon. But the program director says the actual moon landing will be made by Apollo 11 in July.
If you could put Tareyton's charcoal filter on the end of your cigarette, if you could put Tareyton's charcoal filter on your cigarette, well, anyway, if you could put Tareyton's charcoal filter on your cigarette, you'd have a better tasting cigarette. Of course, we can't guarantee it'd smoke as smooth as a Tareyton. To begin with, no other cigarette has Tareyton tobacco. And when that tobacco is smoothed by Tareyton's activated charcoal filter, it tastes even milder. Better face it, if you want your cigarette to smoke as smooth as a Tareyton, it'll just have to be a Tareyton with the activated charcoal filter.
That's why us Tareyton smokers would rather fight than switch.
Venezuelan authorities said today there is real evidence of sabotage in yesterday's plane crash in Maracaibo. 155 people, passengers, crew, and 71 on the ground were killed when the Venezuelan Airlines jet crashed shortly after takeoff. 46 people aboard were Americans. President Nixon's Special Ambassador John Irwin met today in Lima with Peruvian President Juan Velasco Alvarado to talk about oil and fishing rights and try to dampen the rising tide of feeling against the United States. The United States has threatened to cut off economic aid and suspend sales of Peruvian sugar in this country unless Peru pays for the oil company it recently seized. NBC News correspondent Tom Streithorst reports.
For the past 50 years, the oil fields of northern Peru have been the source of an unresolved dispute between the United States and Peruvian governments. At different times, Peru has claimed that the American oil operators had taken too much land or had no legal right to extract oil at all. Owned by a subsidiary of Standard Oil of New Jersey, the properties are worth either $54 or $120 million, depending on whether you use the government's or the company's figure. The equipment is old, and the oil fields are nearing the end of their profitable life. They've been in production longer than any in Latin America. But as a symbol, the expropriated fields represent Peruvian national pride. Workers here are now employees of a government corporation. The government has maintained the benevolent paternalism introduced by the company. Rent for these homes is still purely symbolic. The U.S. company brought in high salaries, free schools and hospitals, a club and a swimming pool for upper-level employees without regard to nationality. Last fall, the Army moved in and ousted a democratically elected president who'd made concessions to IPC. In his place came General Juan Velasco Alvarado. Velasco simply seized the company's holdings. Peru would pay, he said, for IPC's property after IPC paid $690 million for oil Velasco said was extracted illegally. If the United States retaliated for the expropriation, it would be economic aggression. Late last week, President Nixon's envoy, John Irwin, arrived for talks on the problem. Unless Irwin is able to start negotiations leading toward compensation for the properties by April 9th, a 7-year-old law, the Hickenlooper Amendment, requires the United States to cut its foreign aid and end the sugar quota to Peru. The sugar quota is more important than the aid. 250,000 Peruvians live directly from the industry. Peruvian sugar last year earned $45 million more in the United States than it would have on the world market.
A lot more is at stake in this dispute than just oil and sugar. Velasco heads one of the rare popular military dictatorships in Latin America because of his strong stand on the petroleum question. To appear to lose now would be a disaster for him. He's spoken of even more serious consequences, possibly further expropriations or even danger to foreign nationals, if Washington invokes the Hickenlooper Amendment. On the other hand, if Peru can get away with an outright confiscation, other Latin American countries surely will be tempted to try the same thing. Tom Streithorst, NBC News in Peru.
NBC News correspondent Douglas Kiker reports that Joseph Blatchford will be named by President Nixon to succeed Jack Hood Vaughn as director of the Peace Corps. Blatchford, who is 34, presently is running a private community development program in Venezuela and Brazil. David?
The Russians and their friends in Eastern Europe, the members of the Warsaw Pact, are meeting in Moscow this week where they have a great deal to discuss, particularly including the increasingly bloody encounters with the Chinese on their eastern border. The Russians called for a vote of condemnation of China, and everybody voted yes except Romania. The Romanians generally refuse to do whatever the Russians ask. In the latest clash with China, it is said there were about 3,000 men on each side. Several Russians were killed, including an army colonel. Other details are still scarce.
About every 3 seconds, someone, somewhere, opens a can of Super Chemtone wall paint. That's because more and more people are using more Super Chemtone than any other wall paint, for a lot of reasons. Super Chemtone is the easy does-it wall paint. It covers most colors with just one coat. Washes out of brushes and rollers in just soap and water. Yet it dries to a tough, scrubbable finish. And Super Chemtone comes in 880 decorator colors. But probably the biggest reason more people use it is this symbol. The Sherwin-Williams Cover the Earth trademark. It means that Super Chemtone is the best in wall paints. That's why more people use it.
The Huntley Brinkley Report continues. Brought to you by your Phillips 66 dealers from coast to coast. At Phillips 66, it's performance that counts.
know how to charge a battery, a set of spark plugs, with the Supercharger, a Phillips 66 credit card. Good at every Phillips 66 station in all 50 states. Every Best Western and Quality Courts motel. And every Hertz rent-a-car office. The Supercharger. Ask any Phillips 66 dealer for an application. And charge something.
President Nixon said last week that he soon would have something to say about disorders on the college campuses. Today, he conferred for an hour with S.I. Hayakawa, acting president of San Francisco State College, whose school has been the scene of a great deal of disruption. Later, Hayakawa met with newsmen and told them some of what the president had said.
He seemed to feel that being firm with campus disturbances at the same time as you were generous in meeting the needs of minorities and expanding the educational services of colleges and universities was the proper step, that repression by itself is not enough. There must be a real attempt to meet the needs of a changing urban society.
Dr. Hayakawa, did the president indicate what position he might take with respect to depriving federal funds to students who are convicted in connection with these disturbances?
About the federal grants and aid and scholarships for students who have been convicted, his idea, of course, was that that kind of aid should be withdrawn, but also that the application of this rule should be left in the hands of local administrators at the college level. And I must say I pretty much agree with that point of view.
A black student revolt caused cancellation of classes today at Valparaiso University in Indiana. The school was ordered closed to allow 2 days of discussion of the student power demands. Not all revolts by black students have been on integrated campuses. Some have occurred at all Negro schools. NBC News correspondent Fred Briggs reports on a recent protest at Wiley College in the town of Marshall in northeast Texas.
Ringing an old bell to begin classes seems more suited to a one-room schoolhouse than a college campus, but that's the way things are done at Wiley College. Its 750 students come from rural, small towns in East Texas and Louisiana. They are poor, almost all are on scholarships, and in general they seem to be unlikely candidates for campus revolutionaries. Yet they did revolt a month ago, barricading themselves in buildings and ultimately causing the school to close for 2 weeks. They wanted a number of changes, more black studies, better food, and a voice in making policy. But mainly, they wanted school president Dr. Winston Cole to resign.
Well, we felt that Dr. Cole was killing the school, and if he remained here, there would be no school in the next few years.
Why?
Well, since Dr. Cole took over, the school has gone down, starting in '59, when he made the unprecedented move of firing all of his faculty and then rehiring. Well, about 18 left, behind this. I mean, see what he did, he established himself in a position that he would always have power over everyone, and if anyone spoke out or didn't, go along with him or agree with him, well, then this person always had this axe hanging on his head. Let's say that, he was an object of our protest because we felt, that he was killing the school. And with him removed, then we could work on other things, that were wrong, that were wrong with the school.
For male students, one big complaint was their dormitory, a crumbling 60-year-old structure poorly maintained outside and inside. More than 200 students live here, 3 to a room, in what can only be called an on-campus slum. When they go to class, though, they see new buildings, a science building, liberal arts building, student union under construction, and a new library named in honor of President Cole. They also see the spacious mansion he lives in rent-free, and they resent this all the more. Dr. Cole isn't unaware of this, yet the revolt took him by surprise. He hopes the 2-week closing cooled student tempers.
Well, I would hope that the students now would feel that they can talk with me. I had hoped, even before the other situation, that students could talk with me. I had thought that students could talk with me. But I would hope that they would feel that they could come and talk to me about their grievances. They may be justified in any any situation where there's group living, there are people who have reason to present grievances. So I would hope they would use this method rather than the barricading of buildings or the disruption of classes.
Whatever happens here, the students have had a taste of the campus revolution, but not much more. They are still far behind their counterparts in other colleges. Just how far can be seen by the 2-week cooling off period. It worked because the students went home and were told by their angry parents to come back and stop all that demonstrating. And they did as they were told. Fred Briggs, NBC News, at Wiley College in Marshall, Texas.
Retired Admiral U.S. Grant Sharp, who once commanded American forces in the Pacific, said today he was denied permission to take what he called positive action to recover the Pueblo after it was seized by North Korea. He refused to elaborate on this at a public session of the House Armed Services Subcommittee. Earlier, he said he would have sent planes to aid the Pueblo had they been available, and he added that once the ship was in a North Korean harbor, any American military action might have resulted in a second Korean War. David?
Judge Preston Battle, who sentenced James Earl Ray to 99 years in prison, said he himself was not fully satisfied that Ray killed Dr. Martin Luther King alone. He was not fully satisfied. He said there was no conspiracy. He said, however, that unless Ray decided to talk about it, no one would ever know for sure. The Reverend James Bevel, who was with King the night he was shot, said the Memphis police knew about the murder plot 2 days before it happened, but did nothing. He did not give his reasons for saying this. The trial of Sirhan Sirhan continued today, and here's a report from NBC News correspondent Jack Perkins.
Dr. Martin Shore, a clinical psychologist, has been on the stand for about a week now. At first, defense lawyers said they thought he was a very strong witness. He began by describing Sirhan as a Jekyll and Hyde personality, paranoid and schizophrenic, intelligent but highly aggressive. He based this, he said, on several tests he'd given Sirhan. He showed some of those to the jury. There were Rorschach tests, ink blots, like this one. Sirhan said this looked to him like a picture of a flying dove, or like crushed frogs. Dr. Shore said this showed his ambivalence. This one, Sirhan said, looked like an exploding profile. In this, he saw a Watusi dancer. Here, a monster charging at him. Dr. Shore said this illustrated his paranoia, delusions of persecution. Sirhan was shown this rough picture and told to make up a story about it. He said, it's a woman about to commit suicide, but she can't reach the gun lying on the floor. He was shown a blank piece of paper and told to make up a story about it. He said, he saw there an arrogant, smirking man. It is Moshe Dayan at the height of his career, and a bullet is crashing into his brain. Sirhan was asked, do you see yourself in that picture? He said, sir, I am that picture. I am firing the gun. Dr. Shore testified, if society pushes a person like this, he's going to explode. He said if Sirhan sits in this courtroom smiling a lot during all this, it's because he's often out of touch with reality, off in his own place. Dr. Shore concluded, Sirhan killed Kennedy as a substitute for his father, whom he hated and would like to have killed. Well, Dr. Shore ran into trouble and controversy when it was discovered that his language in his report on this case seemed to have been copied from a book written by a New York doctor. For instance, in that book, the author, Dr. Brussel, wrote of another case, quote, the only real solution was to look for a compromise. He did. He found a symbolic replica of his mother, killed her. Compare that with the language of Dr. Shore in this case, when he wrote, the only real solution is to look for a compromise. He does. He finds a symbolic replica of his father in the form of Kennedy, kills him. There were several other passages where Dr. Shore, either consciously or unconsciously, had copied, or as the prosecution said today, cribbed from this book. Prosecutors believe it has destroyed his credibility. Defense lawyers say they have 5 more doctors waiting to testify after him. Jack Perkins, NBC News, Los Angeles.
But you could with a Black & Decker variable speed drill. Your finger on the accelerator gives you the speed you need bit on metal without a scratch. Or drive a screw without a blister. Just flip this switch to shift into reverse. This double insulated power tool will mix a can of paint without a splash. Don't try this with a single speed drill, but you can do it with a Black & Decker variable speed. Or you think of something. It does so much, maybe we shouldn't call it a drill at all. Your Black & Decker dealer can show you electric drills in every type, size, and price range for every imaginable job. You can expect the best from Black & Decker.
More than 1,300 American paratroopers today jumped into South Korea to climax an 8,500-mile flight from the United States. The jump was part of a military exercise with the South Koreans. Vice President Agnew today said the government will sponsor day camps this summer for an estimated 75,000 poor children in 40 cities. Astronaut James Lovell will help supervise the program. David?
A few years ago, and maybe still, there was a nerve tonic bottled, sold widely in this country, containing vitamins and so on, plus a very high alcoholic content. And it was popular in parts of the country where prohibitionist sentiment was still strong. Its attraction seemed to be that those morally opposed to whiskey could take the nerve tonic and get the same effect. Well, today in London, it is seen where this kind of medication can lead. They arrested a man named Carl Drakes and charged him with driving drunk. They found, however, he had not been drinking whiskey or gin. He said he had had the flu and had been taking a drugstore tonic to build up his strength. The police examined his medical tonic and found it was 134 proof, twice as strong as whiskey. They found him guilty and fined him $96. Good night, Chet.
Good night, David. Good night for NBC News.
If you owned one of these rascals, what would you feed him? Lettuce? Peanuts? Bananas? And this character. Birdseed, of course. Almost any grain or cereal. But dogs are different. Dogs need meat. And that's why so many veterinarians recommend Alpo. Veterinarians know most dog foods are cereal-based. And they know that Alpo is 100% meat. Just open one can and see for yourself. You'll see chunks of meat, radiant broiled chunks, jam-packed with the precious proteins of meat, because Alpo is 100% meat, not a speck of starchy cereal. Sure, Alpo costs more than other dog foods, naturally. Meat costs more than cereal. But see what happens to your dog when you switch him from cereal to Alpo.
The world's most beautiful women, foremost fashions, and top recording artists in the wonderful world of pizzazz.